Mr. Jasper, you'll enjoy it. I've had cardiac rehab,
Yeah.
and honestly, it's a teaching experience too.
Mhm.
So you gain some good knowledge out of it, and
Right.
I think it'll be worth your time. Where are you going for it?
South County, the hospital.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Down in the basement, they've got looks like a gym,
Okay.
all kinds of equipment.
Yeah.
I just did, they just have you doing various exercises today. Of course, they got you on a heart monitor while you're doing all of it.
Right. Do they have like classes for, like dietary classes and stuff like that to help you with different things, teach you different things?
Yeah, from what I understand, that'll be, I don't know what the format is or when it'll happen, but there'll be stuff about stress relief and diet and
Right.
just a whole comprehensive plan.
They had this little book when I went, which was mine's been almost 15 years since I had my heart attack. And they had a little book that you could purchase, and it had all the grams of fat in different foods and how many calories and so forth. It was an eye opener, even though I didn't eat a lot of fried foods, that some of them were just like, oh my God, like the blooming onion, it's like 20, I forget what they said, 2,200 calories in a blooming onion and 30 something grams of fat
Wow.
in one blooming onion. Yeah. Yeah. So it does make you think about things a little differently. So,
well, we've been nutrition conscious for a lot of years and do a lot of the right things. Not all the time, but for the most part, you can have a little celebration here and there.
Well, sometimes it has nothing to do with it. It has to do with your family history.
That's true.
So, yes.
Yeah, I had a friend that she probably didn't weigh 125 pounds and her cholesterol was through the roof.
I take shots for my cholesterol. I have to inject myself.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Without medicine, I'm over 500.
Oh, wow.
So it's genetic.
Mine's been consistent. I've always been the one that they're always concerned about, always been just a little over 200 and it's never varied.
Yeah.
I've brought the good one up with exercise and my doctor's happy.
Yeah. Well, that's great news.
Yeah, it used to be, 200 was okay. Now they want you 180 or something. And
it has a lot. It just has to do with the good one and the bad one.
Right. Ratios.
Yeah. Yep.
Like we're filling up.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it looks like Sean's in orbit.
Yeah, I'm in orbit. Good evening, everyone. How are you all?
Hi. What kind of background is that?
Are we celebrating
are we celebrating the landing on the moon?
Maybe so. You never know where I'm going to
pretty
show up.
You never know, right? Yeah, how about that, right?
Really, it's to show the background so that you guys don't really see what's behind me, which is probably a junky storage room that I'm sitting in.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing about the background ones, it kind of cuts people off. I was doing a deposition the other day, and one of the lawyers had a background on, and it was like she had no shoulder half the time. If she moved a certain way, half of her body was gone. It's kind of odd. It was a little bit bizarre. Well, one of those days.
So I see everybody here except for Nick. I'm going to see. Let me just check the attendees to make sure that he's on that list here. Maybe he hasn't arrived yet.
He recuses himself though, Sean. So he's recused.
Yeah, we just had one other item besides.
Oh, that's right. That's
the
right.
ongoing project.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, we do have a quorum though, so I don't know if the vice chair would like to wait an extra minute or whatever the pleasure is.
Yeah, we can wait a minute if you don't mind. No problem.
Okay.
Hello.
Is Bo on, Sean, is Bo, he's not on, right?
Yeah, I think he's on as an attendee. I'm trying to move him into a panelist here.
Okay. Just wanted to know whether I should put him on my list. All right.
Does someone know where the minutes are from the January meeting? On the town website, there's board meetings for 20, but I'm not seeing anything for 21. I thought maybe they'd make it up there before we met tonight. So I know we're supposed to approve them.
I saw that too. It looked like 2021 was not there.
Okay, I clicked on just the zoning board. Oh, but that's the agendas, I think. Yeah, it's still the agenda. It's not the minutes.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Why don't you ask Sam? Sam, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's possible that I forgot to put them onto clerk base. Could we table them for the next meeting?
Okay. She
Okay.
forgot.
Sam, did you guys have a list of the meetings this year? Did we already do that?
I believe we did that last month.
Did you send me a copy of it?
I can certainly double check.
Yeah, I can't remember if you did.
Yeah, I think we did, Mary Ellen, but
Yeah, you
we'll
might have,
double
you might
check.
have. Yeah, I'll check it. It's all right. I can check that. Hold on. Well, let me go do that right now. Just to make sure. I don't think I received a list of them.
Okay, we'll send that over to you, Mary Ellen.
All right,
No worries.
thank you very much. Yeah.
Yep.
Because I would have written them in my book and I just looked the next month, there's nothing in there, so. that's why.
All right.
Mr. Vice Chair, I think I don't see Nick at this point, so I don't know if you guys want to get started. We do have a quorum otherwise.
Yeah, we can get started.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay, let me go ahead and just hit the recording of the meeting, and then I'll let you know when we're ready to go. Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, we are live.
Excellent. All right. So what are we doing here? We're just continuing with now we've closed the public meeting, basically. Now we're in discussion, correct?
If you're gonna start discussing that, you should read into the record the name of the case and all that kind of stuff that's on the agenda.
Right. Let me find that here. Hold on. All right, here we go. So we're going to call the meeting to order for tonight. We have an approval for minutes on the,
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Jeff, you unmuted, you muted yourself.
there we go.
And Mr. Vice Chair, I might suggest that that we just, for the purposes of just of clarity, maybe we just go through the roll call just to know who is present this evening.
Yeah, we can do that. So can I get a roll call from all the attendees here on the board, please?
Sean Carney, present.
Chelsea Batinger, present.
Daniel Jarst for president.
Karen Bozano, present.
Lindsay Hannon, present.
And I myself, Jeff Valancourt, is present. So we have the approval of minutes that were from the previous meeting that we're going to table because we don't have them present with us to do so. And then we have some continued business of the discussion and decision of the applicant of GD Richmond Beaver River LLC in North Kingstown for a special use permit to install a commercial solar energy system at 172 Beaver River Road, Lot 12, Richmond, Tax Assessor's Plot 8E.
Jeff,
Yes,
I sent you all a partial draft of a decision with mostly boilerplate information on it so that you would have someplace to start with. If you want to change anything that's on that boilerplate, you need to do that. Don't assume it's correct just because I wrote it down. You need to go through everything, and if you want to make any changes to it, please do.
excellent, thank you. Did everyone get that from the board?
It was, I believe it was also posted with the agenda. So John Mancini, did you see that? The draft decision?
I did see it, yes, thank you.
Okay.
I did.
All right.
Okay, guys, open the discussion here.
Is it appropriate for us to move through this in sections? Like the application, that we find that language to be appropriate? Because we need to adopt this, is that right, Karen?
Correct. Yes, you can do it that way. That makes sense. You won't be formally voting on everything. You'll just be reaching a consensus and making sure that everybody's okay with the language so that when someone does make a motion at the end, you know what to do.
Right.
Anybody want to take the conversation as far as the line by line findings of fact?
I'm skimming back over. I read over it when Karen distributed it.
Yep.
And as near as I could tell, these first 7 items that are related to the application, as near as I know, they are accurately represented.
This is Chelsea Batinger. I agree. I read everything and I don't have any objection to anything that's in there. So I wouldn't change anything that's in this draft.
Yeah, I've noted that some of the things that came up during the course of the hearing, things that were agreed to by the applicant, they are also represented. I'm thinking particularly in section 6 with the additional landscape buffer on the north side of the system. And some of the other things that were represented, information about the sound levels, so forth. So I'm comfortable with 1 through 7.
If everybody's comfortable with 1 through 7, then you can discuss the second section, consistency with the comprehensive community plan. That would be paragraphs 8, 9, and 10. Does anybody want to change anything in there?
Yeah, I'm taking the time to give another review of it here.
This is Chelsea Batinger. I wouldn't change anything 8 through 10. 8 and 9 are things the planning board found, and it was in a written document. And then number 10, we have exhibits from the applicant that states that. I think it's exhibit 24 or 25, I think.
Yeah, don't worry about using those exhibit numbers because they were, I think Sean put them on there for convenience in making the list rather than to designate them as individual exhibits.
Okay.
So you can refer to them if you want to, because some people probably still have a copy of that agenda, but you can also describe them. That way everybody knows which one you're talking about, because at some point during the hearing, the numbers were changed on some of them. So it's probably a good idea to describe what the document is as well as the number if you're going to talk about it.
I was referencing documents submitted by Mr. Pimentel. Just his opinion that the application is consistent with our comprehensive community plan. And then there was another document by Mr. Pimentel that went through the requirements for a special use permit. So, and those reports were dated September 25th of 2020. So I wouldn't change 8 through 10.
I agree with that as well.
I concur too.
The next section is compliance with section 1834.030A of the zoning ordinance, and that would be paragraphs 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Yeah, from my perspective, those are critical issues from the town attorney, and those statements, particularly 11 and 12. I think that's really, in my view, what it hinges on is the reality of those. I think that's really where.
I'm sorry. I think that's really where. Can I, Mr. Joshua?
Yes.
Did you just say, you think, I think that's really where, and then I couldn't hear you say anything after that.
I'm sorry. I think I said everything. I think those are the critical factors there. Of course, then we'll have to come up with our own determination. Because item 14 is the representative attorney that takes a different legal perspective on that matter of the statement of the town zoning ordinance. So I think 11 through 14 are actual, they're the representations of what was presented, what was in discovery, and I don't see a need to change anything there.
Okay, the next section is compliance with section 1834-030B through 1834-030F of the zoning ordinance, and that's paragraph 15. In other words, except for the section that was in dispute that you just discussed, otherwise the application complies with the ordinance. If you don't agree with that, you need to make some changes to the section.
This is Chelsea Batinger. I agree. B through F and 15 are all from the application. So I don't see anything wrong with those statements.
Excuse me.
Anybody else?
Sean Carney, I'll agree with Chelsea.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Jeff, and I agree. So far, everything is accurate.
Yeah, just while we're on our way through this, thank you, Karen, for your labors.
The final section is requirements for a special use permit, and you don't have to agree or disagree with that because I took it directly from the zoning ordinance. That's just a boilerplate recitation of what you need to consider in your decision. And we usually include that in zoning ordinance decisions, what the criteria are that you have to consider. So now you need to make some additional findings of fact about the matters that were in dispute. Specifically, consistency with the comprehensive plan and compliance with section 1834-030A.
So that's really where we're coming down to come in with our own decision and what we're going to go with, right?
Right.
So you've got these set out with the 3 critical factors, one way or the other.
Right. So you guys have to make some findings of fact about those. And I didn't try to draft anything because I don't have any idea what's on your minds. You're going to have to articulate those. You could start by discussing, because it's the first one that came up in the draft, you could start by discussing consistency with the comprehensive plan. The planning board thought that the application is not consistent, and Mr. Pimentel testified that it was consistent. So I think you have to make a finding on whether or not it's consistent, and if it's not consistent, why.
This is Chelsea Batinger. In my opinion, I don't believe that this application is consistent with the comprehensive community plan. And I agree with the planning board. We did hear testimony from the town that this site is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And that would have the solar panel system would have a negative impact on that eligibility. I also think that this particular solar array would have a negative impact on the scenic value, especially because I don't think the vegetative buffers are sufficient. I think that the solar array is going to be visible. And I just don't see this size of the solar array to be consistent with the community plan in Richmond.
This is Daniel Jarstra. I agree with that. And, you know, as I consider that road, it's familiar to me. It's not that far away, and I bicycle on it, drive on it. And I just look at the visual representations provided by the application of the vegetative buffer. I understand that the idea is to screen the view of the panels, which I think, if we're all honest, we understand it won't do so initially. The goal is that it will do so in time. But to me, the very screen will seem out of place. It will not be consistent with the surrounding environment. The very screen will seem out of place, and that's a factor in addition to the things that Chelsea has mentioned. And I think about the people that live there and what they're accustomed to seeing. You know, the historic home right across the road, they could see all the way to the river, and the wildlife and so forth. All of that's going to be taken away. In addition, the other factor is, you know, the noise level is low, but I've heard transformers hum, and in my opinion is that they're going to notice it in that house. It's going to become a factor that would be ever present with them.
This is Lindsay Hannon. I agree with Daniel and what he just said. I believe that given the size of the landscape of the arrays, I believe that it will negatively impact the neighbors nearby. With the noise and the site.
So that really is the conclusion of law. We're really arguing for the second after the or. The proposed use will substantially or permanently harm the appropriate use of the surrounding property, because we've named a couple of reasons. The impact on the scenic quality, the impact on the scenic river, the historical river, the change of the overall, I'll use the word environment of that area. All these will be factors that will permanently harm the appropriate use of the surrounding property.
John Carney, I don't know what more I can add to what you folks have already said.
And this is Jeff, and I agree. The only question I would have would be is if us as the zoning board in the past have, you know, come up with alternatives for the applicants to say, okay, well, you know, if this is part of the question, is there anything that we as the board can put forth toward the applicant or within ourselves and say, well, the buffer needs to be 150 feet high and 50 feet wide, and you know, those type of things. Like, in other words, do any of you think if we came up with an alternative vegetative area that it would just make matters worse by
Yeah, Jeff, you're correct. Whenever you're looking at a special use permit application like this, one of the questions that you have to ask yourself is whether there are any conditions that you could put on an approval that would mitigate any of the problems that you found.
That's what I'm asking everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the right question.
Yeah, I don't know what they could be because of the nature of the site. The very site has its own unique qualities, and you know, anything that might be added to try to obscure or somehow mask the presence of a solar array, a solar system, is going to substantially alter the whole the feel, the word ambiance, you know, just the character, the quality of that area. There's nothing that can be required of the applicant that's going to change or protect the river itself. I know they talk about various mitigations for erosion and sediment and so forth. And that may all work fine. The problem is if at any time there's a failure of that and the Beaver River is affected, then it's done. There's no going back on it. I think the uniqueness of this particular property makes it, if you say improbable, then there's got to be some solution. It may just be impossible to mitigate the harm of putting a solar system in that particular location. I don't know what it would be.
I got you.
Yeah, this is Chelsea Batinger. I mean, even if we said the proposed solar energy system is too large, make it smaller or use less acreage. It's where the site is located. Like Daniel said, you have the Beaver River, but also this site is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And part of the comprehensive community plan includes historic value. So I don't see where we could impose any further conditions on the applicant.
Even just as you were saying that, adding additional conditions might just make the very things that concern me even more obtuse. I like vegetative screens and all that, but they just, if you make it bigger, wider, it just makes it more obvious and more out of place.
Yep.
Is that all everybody's got on consistency with the comprehensive plan? Anybody else have anything? How about compliance with section 1834030A of the zoning ordinance?
I'm happy to speak to that. I don't need to be the first one to, if somebody else wants to jump out there. I'll just say, to me, it really pivots on that. And it's like so many things, it comes down to the definition and the meaning of words. And I know that the applicant's attorneys have argued for one interpretation. I don't agree with that interpretation. We've heard the town attorney representing the town, argue as well. It's been argued that the town changed that, added language, and therefore that they were concurring with the applicant's legal opinion. And I don't think that's consistent. I think that the way the ordinance was written before and after the change does not substantially in any way change that fact that the system must be within. That's what it's always said. And it does not say a part of it. It says the system must be within, and a system as a whole. And to me, linguistically, I'm not a lawyer, but legally, logically, the system is not within 2 miles. And that's what it really hinges on in my mind. I've come persuaded to that, even as we move through this process, that really is the matter.
This is Chelsea Batinger. And looking at what a solar energy system is, according to the town, it's a ground-mounted solar panel array and its associated structures and components. That to me means a solar energy system is a unitary thing. And that unitary thing has to be within 2 miles. And this application falls short of that. So I don't think that the applicant is in compliance with 183430A.
I'm going to agree with that. I mean, the solar system and it's wires and it's the grid work and it's the conduits, and if you sever any part of the system, it no longer works. It's all dependent upon itself. So it's a total unit. And what does it say? Solar system shall be within the 2 miles. So, yeah. So
Yeah,
the
when we-
topic. So
We saw-
basically, go ahead, Jeff, Daniel.
No, sorry, Jeff. I thought you were done.
No, I'm just thinking as I'm saying it, you know. My point is if they presented this permit at the time to have all of the items within that 2-mile radius, then the 2-mile radius and then that circle, then it would be, you know, we'd be talking about the comprehensive plan. We wouldn't be talking about this part of it, but they
Right.
extend over into it. And I'm thinking to myself, what other ways can we have this conversation? Well, can you put a solar system within the wetland boundary? No. Why? Why can't you? Because it's not allowed, even though it's on the property. So if you start where it's not a wetland and you extend it into the wetlands, you're not in compliance. So if you start where it's within the 2-mile and you extend it outside of the 2-mile radius, it's not in compliance.
That's right.
So it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's a system. You know, it's like, well, my system is bigger than my lot. Let me extend it into my neighbors. No, you can't do that. So my system is bigger than the 2-mile radius that you've allowed me to have it within. Nope, you can't have it. It's too big. My parking space is too small for my 50-foot wide trailer. Sorry, you can't have it. So that's the way I look at it too. If it was presented as an array within that area, then we wouldn't be talking about this particular portion of it, if it complies or not. And doesn't comply with it, in my opinion.
I agree. I thought it was a good analogy with the wetland and moving within it. I think we had it represented by the applicant that maybe there's 20%, something like that, or a little less than that, maybe is within the 2-mile radius. And, if I look at that, even if 80%, only 20% was out, it's still the system's outside of the radius. If 2 feet of the system are outside of it, it's not within the 2-mile radius. It's the system. So
Yeah.
it's not a matter of percentages. We're talking about a singular whole, the system.
Right. So if the system is only within that circumference of the, whatever's within that 2-mile radius, then we would be looking at that and we say, all right, well, it complies with that. That would be one of the burdens that they would have to, achieve, or whatever you want to call it, within the list. They complied with that, just like all the other stuff we're talking about, the 25-foot buffer and the thing and the vegetation. Okay, that all applies. Because if they didn't present that stuff, then we'd be talking about that, but we're not, because that's within compliance on their application. This particular part doesn't. So if this particular part, forget about the comprehensive part at the moment, that you can, say, well, the historical value and everything else that we're talking about. Well, some people may think that that's appropriately, hey, it's a classic car, but it's a Gremlin. Well, or it's a classic car and it's a Cadillac. Well, there's 2 different opinions about that. And you could probably talk about that, about the historical nature of it and what your view is on the difference between the 2. And that's fine. It's an old mill. It doesn't look very good, but hey, it's historical. And is that part of the comprehensive plan? Do we knock it down? Do we put something else up? Whoa, that's fine. That's open to interpretation, in my opinion. And I agree with what everyone said about the comprehensive plan. I'm just putting it out there that you could have different opinions, agree and disagree. But with this particular component, it's a complete system and it extends beyond the boundary. And as presented as a pass or fail, it fails.
I agree.
That.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
No,
I
that's
agree.
good.
I agree with that. I think that the comprehensive plan could be is a gray area. Some people might lean one way or the other, but I think that statement and the statement, I believe is his name, Russell Brown, that's to me black and white. And I believe he's right. It's not. I think that statement alone is what this whole decision stands on.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
It's either within or it's not within. It is
Right.
or it isn't.
Right, and I don't think we're in the position to be like, oh, hey, by the way, you didn't fill it out right. Now go home and fill it out a different way and keep coming back, keep coming back. I don't know how that falls into play, or if it's, we've already relived this particular application 2 or 3 times now, if I'm not mistaken. What's the history on it, Karen?
This is the second time.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that if they could comply 100%, they would have changed the application already.
Right.
Right. Any other findings of fact about anything else that you heard?
This is Chelsea Batinger. Also, just a quick note about the definition of within. We were pointed to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and I find within to mean that to be used as a word to indicate an enclosure, or the definition in the dictionary also says to the inside of or in. I don't think within 2 miles means it could be 2.1 miles, in the range of 2 miles. I think it has to be with inside of that 2 miles. And again, not the entire system is not inside of that 2 miles.
Right. I think within creates the boundary, whether it's time or whether it's space, or, that what you're saying. Hey, you got to pay me within 30 days. Well, you pay me within 27, we're all set. It's day 31, you're not within 30 days. Your system has to be within 2 miles. Now your system is within 1 mile or whatever the measurement is. Sorry, it's not within. It's not within. You're putting the 8 ounces in the 8-ounce glass. Anything that spills over, it's all done.
You guys are full of findings of fact tonight. Anything else?
I don't know. Do we need to find any more facts besides?
I don't think you do, but it's entirely up to you. You guys get to decide. You can make whatever findings you think are relevant. I'm just checking to make sure if there's any other issues that you want to address besides those 2 that you just addressed.
I think under item 2, the proposed use of this or the proposed use or its location of the site will result in conditions that will harm the public health, safety, and welfare.
Yeah, I was going to get to that as soon as I
Yep.
made sure that nobody else had any other findings of fact.
Okay.
That you wanted to make. We can get to the conclusions of law. And you were saying, Daniel, that under the first one, the proposed use will substantially or permanently harm the appropriate use of surrounding property because.
Well, I mentioned the sound factors for the residents that live across the street. We were given decibel levels. I think of an example. The facility where we meet, we have a speaker that sometimes gets left on. And if the amp's not on, the speaker hums. It's very low. It's very quiet, but it's very annoying, and it's nonstop. And I just think about living in proximity of transformers. You're laying there in bed at night or whatever it may be. There's going to be that steady hum, and I think that's a matter of fact. It's hard to argue how loud it will be in the house, but I think it'll be noticeable. And the other matter was, I think that the resident of the historic home there across there made the case for that. Nobody's looked at the view from her second floor window that looks out across there, and just what the impact of having this system with a vegetative buffer, what it will do to the view that they currently have. With that in place, the detrimental degradation that it'll bring to them when they look out their bedroom window. Now, I mentioned, they can see clear to the river and whatever wildlife in the field, all that would just be taken away. I think that's a finding of fact.
I agree. And she was directly across from, was it the entrance? To that?
I know, I remember she was directly across, and if I'm not mistaken, in an elevated position.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
John Carney, I think to support Daniel's comments, it doesn't necessarily need to meet a decibel threshold. It's continuous noise that can certainly be an annoyance, and certainly, meet that threshold of not of harming the, use and sanctity of those people's homes.
I'll use an example. I have hearing loss at 3,000 hertz, and my audiologist explains to me that I hear a buzzing because I'm not hearing anything, and my brain supplies that. And so if I don't have my hearing aids in, which compensates for that, that's always present. People talk about tinnitus or whatever. It's just a constant nuisance, and you have to live with it. And there's very few things to mitigate with it. And to me, it seems along that sort of line. It's just ever present, no way to get rid of it. 25 years later, maybe it's gone. It just seems unreasonable. And again, this family has a historical connection to this home generationally, and they're disrupting what they've been able to enjoy as a family on that site for years. And now, if this was approved, it would impinge upon their longstanding relationship with the property and enjoyment of the property.
John Carney, I believe her testimony said that house was one of the original homes in the Richmond district.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chelsea Batinger. I wanted to just talk about the possible and I believe likely depreciation in value of the houses nearby. And that's one of the things that we can consider. I'm looking at 1852-60B of the zoning ordinance. It says whether the proposed use will generate noise, which we've already discussed and I agree with, odor or other effects that cannot be mitigated by the imposition of conditions or safeguards. And I think the depreciation in value could fall into that category of other effects that can't be changed with the imposition of additional conditions on the applicant. So I think that also goes to number 1 in subsection A that we're discussing. So that's my thought. And I know the applicant presented some material going towards the depreciation in value. I don't find it, I didn't give much weight to it. I know I wouldn't want to live across the street from this large of a solar array where the vegetative buffer is just not going to be sufficient, in my opinion.
I'm being careful with my words because I'm not trying to tell you how to decide this. But I think it might be difficult to reconcile a change in property values with the criteria for a special use permit that you have to consider. You have to consider whether the use will substantially or permanently harm the appropriate use of the property, and whether the proposed use will result in conditions that will harm the public health, safety, and welfare. And I'm not sure how either of those relate directly to a decrease in property values. And I didn't say anything about the relevance while you were hearing this testimony because I didn't want to suggest any outcome. But I think that if you're going to include that in the decision, then you need to articulate specifically how a decrease in property value is going to relate to one of those criteria for special use permit.
I'll think of some. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I think it's a difficult thing to derive at. We had two different studies presented, one from other states far away, and then it was brought to our attention of a study done by professors and so forth at URI. I think that's a hard thing to call.
I think we could do our own cursory review of that right here and now and say, hey, here's a house for $300,000. How much more advantageous to that price would everyone want? Would you jump on that purchase, or would you offer lower if there was 14 acres of solar in your front yard?
I think the question that I'm asking you is whether it's relevant to what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really relevant. I think it's just part of the conversation as to what they presented, what we listened to, and how we're, kind of, what do we all think about that testimony and how it's relevant? Is it relevant? No, I don't think so.
Well, I just want to add that for generations, lawyers have automatically assumed that appropriate use of the property means property values. And they've been, and some lawyers still do this. They just routinely hire real estate experts to come and testify in favor of special use permits. I have always questioned whether or not it's relevant to the criteria. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm saying that I maybe think it's not, but it's entirely up to you guys what you want to decide about that. If you can think of some way to articulate a decrease in property values that is related, the way that it relates, if you can articulate the way that it relates to substantial or permanent harm to the appropriate use of the property, then I'll put something in the decision on that.
I'm a lawyer, so that makes sense why I think that.
Right.
I just go back to when I was young, my father said that something's worth what the buyer and the seller agree upon. And, that can fluctuate. I mean, I think it's hypothetically, you could have someone considering buying the property across the street and they just be over the moon because there's a solar array there. But then there's probably as many people would say, no, that doesn't do anything for me. I think it's a very difficult thing. That's why, when I saw the studies that were presented, I don't know that they're necessarily helpful because they're about other places. What's the impact on that property? One, the property the solar array would be on, and then those people in proximity. What's the effect on their values, which is something I think we as members of the community, the zoning board of Richmond, need to be mindful of. And I think it's a hard call is to say what the impact would be. Lawyers, you say lawyers tend to argue that historically. So what? I don't know that just because there's an improvement necessarily means the property goes up. Depends on what it is. And somebody making an improvement on their property may have an impact in the negative way on my property.
So what about the second part of the conclusions of law? I think you're saying that the proposed use or its location on the site will result in conditions that will harm the public health, safety, and welfare. And you have to finish that sentence and explain why the proposed use or its location on the site will result in conditions that would harm the public health, safety, and welfare. Do you want to include the findings about the noise there?
Yes, I was thinking that was appropriate, that the welfare of the neighbors would be impinged upon because of the constant noise of the transformers.
Okay.
Another factor would be that those of our community, it will have an impact on our welfare and the enjoyment that comes from frequenting Beaver River Road. The residents that we heard from, all spoke of that and their concerns. Of course, there's many other people. And then, there's people that come to Richmond, looking at Richmond, and they drive through and there's much that's commendable. how I think it would have been detrimental, how they would view a trip down Beaver River Road with this in place as compared to a trip down the road at this point.
Okay, under conditions that will harm the public health, safety, and welfare, you mentioned earlier something about potential pollution to the river.
Right. In the applicant's testimony, they were talking about in the installation, there would be the buffers for erosion and so forth. And you're going to have panels. What do we read? There's 15,000 of these things, something like that, going in there. That's going to block a lot of rainfall. There's going to be a runoff at the front of those. You're going to have concentrated water. It's going to move. It's going to go somewhere. The river's over there on reason because the grade of the land heads that way. And if we end up with a situation where there's erosion and the temporary buffers they put in place, usually they're a product inside of some sort of sock or netting that's staked down. If that fails or breaks through, the Beaver River receives that sediment and it's impacted immediately. And the pristine nature of the river is altered. And how quickly does it recover?
Okay.
Daniel, this is Sean. What about the microclimatology of the area? With those panels, we're not absorbing the sun into the ground anymore. You're now absorbing that heat into the panel. That heat's now reflecting out. How will that change the surrounding vegetation and climate within that piece of property and surrounding properties?
I think the problem with that, Sean, is that you didn't hear any testimony on that. And in order to make a finding of fact, you would have had to have had some kind of evidence entered into the record on that, because it's not something that ordinarily that a layperson would be able to judge. It would be more like you would need an expert opinion on that, and I don't think that there's any evidence in the record that that spoke specifically to that effect. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying that I don't think that there's enough in the record for you to make a finding on it.
Yep, understand.
Okay. How about the third conclusion of law? The proposed use will not be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance because it will not comply with 1834-030A.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Anything else?
Before we go further, I see a couple attendees who have their hands raised, and I saw that there was an individual using a chat feature. I would just like to remind everyone on the call tonight that the public hearing is closed, so we're not taking any further testimony or acknowledgement of any speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. You should probably disable the chat feature too.
Yep, just did that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any additional conclusions of law? I don't hear anybody. Okay. I wrote down or tried to write down everything that you said. Now I can draft something based on what you said and have you review it at your next meeting and vote on it, or I can just draft something based on what you said and have Jeff come in and sign it and record it. It depends on how concerned you are about exactly what the language is that is going to be used in the decision and whether you want to review it before it's finalized. And if you want to do that, that's perfectly okay with me. I can put the rest of this together based on what you said tonight and give you copies to review, and you can vote on it at your next meeting. Or you could vote on it tonight if you want to.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we vote on it, I have no problem trusting you to rightly represent what we said and
That's
probably
better
put it,
than the planning board does. They don't trust me.
and that, that you would put it in the proper format and legal language and all that. I'm sure you're very competent to do that. I just wonder, if that would have any bearing on, how it's viewed, if there's any appeal to it, if it.
It would, as long as I do it accurately, it won't, because we're going to have a transcript of this discussion that you're having now. And if there's any question about whether your decision complies with what you actually, reflects what you actually said, anyone who wants to challenge that will be able to go back to the transcript and read the transcript and say, look, it's wrong because that's not exactly what they said. So, no, I don't think that would be a serious problem. If we did not have a stenographer taking this down, then I would say maybe it will, but I don't think that will be a problem legally. That's a good question too.
We have a stenographer and it's being recorded also. Yeah.
Right. Yep. So it's up to you. I'm perfectly okay with drafting something for you to review at your next meeting if that's what you want to do, or you can just vote tonight.
I'm prepared to vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I am too.
Then what you might want to do is, because I think you were all in agreement, I don't think that there was any disagreement at any point about the findings of fact that everybody suggested. So the motion that you might want to make is to deny the application for special use permit based on all of the findings of fact and conclusions of law that were articulated by the board members during the discussion.
I think that's a very fine motion. I'll make that.
I second that motion.
Okay. You should probably have a roll call vote.
Let's have a roll call vote. Yes.
John Carney, aye.
Chelsea Batinger, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
Daniel Jarst for aye.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
Did Jeff vote?
Jeff, did you vote? I'm sorry.
Jeff Valencourt, aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. For the next hearing, I think I'm looking for Karen. Yeah, there she is. Okay, Karen Bazzano was still on the call. You should have as many zoning board members present at every public hearing as you have available. Even if you have 6, that's okay. Because if somebody drops out, then if somebody who's a regular member drops out, then both alternates would have to vote. So all 6 of you should take part in the next public hearing that you're going to open in just a second.
Yeah, I don't anticipate needing to miss any meetings this year. With being by Zoom, it makes it much more flexible.
It does, but you never can tell what's going to happen. I've seen
Right.
very strange things happen in the
Right.
zoning boards.
Yeah, I look forward to when we actually can meet in person.
Yes. So Jeff, you want to have somebody make a motion to open the second matter, the public hearing on Wowalone?
Can I get a motion to open a public hearing on the next matter for the WALM application? I don't have that paperwork in front of me to read it off.
I could read it into the record, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank
I might want to just point out to the zoning board here as well that I was informed earlier this afternoon by the chair of the board that the applicant was considering a continuance to the next scheduled meeting of the zoning board review, and I don't see the attorney on speaking on behalf of this particular application on the call tonight. So I just wanted to just keep the board aware of that.
So I think, Jeff, what you want to do is ask if Mr. Surdet is present. And if he's not, then someone should make a motion to continue the public hearing to March 22nd.
All right, so Mr. Surter may be in the participant pool, and if he is, please make yourself known to Sean.
I don't see him here. I'm just going over the list and I don't see him here anywhere.
Is there anyone on the attendee list tonight speaking on behalf of this application? If so, please raise your hand, or if you're calling by dial-in, please hit *9 on your dial tone to be recognized. And I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay, right. Yeah, so you need to continue this matter to March 22nd.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move that we continue the matter of the Wawalum Reservation applicant until March 22nd meeting.
Chelsea Batinger, I second.
Excellent. Can I get do I need a vote on that or something?
Yeah, roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Yep.
Chelsea Batinger, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
John Carney, aye.
Daniel Jarst for aye.
And myself, Jeff Valencourt, aye. Okay. So we will continue this until, what was that, March 20?
March 22nd.
Yep.
Would it be appropriate to motion to adjourn then?
Seems that way to me.
Yep, I think so.
So moved.
Second. All in
John Carney,
favor?
aye.
Aye.
Batinger, aye.
Aye.
And Jeff, aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
See you next month.
Thank you all. Good evening.